Hello, my name is George Freestone, and I'm a member of Advent Lutheran Church, which is the image that you see behind me in West Lawn, Pennsylvania. But I come to you today as a member of the information gathering team to support the election of our next bishop here in the Northeastern Pennsylvania Synod. I wanted you to see me at the start of our presentation, a presentation summarizing the survey responses. We had originally planned to do this at a series of in-person meetings, but unfortunately, coronavirus threw us a bit of a curveball. But because we're taking our responsibility for sharing results from this survey back to those throughout the Synod seriously, we're going to start at least by using the ability for Zoom to record a presentation. We will post it on YouTube for you to enjoy. And then down the road, we'll see whether or not we can arrange for either, more likely, Zoom sessions where we have interaction and or in-person meetings. Okay, so what are we going to do in today's recorded session? Well, first of all, I'm going to try and bolster your interest by talking about 5 takeaways that the team has summarized from all of the survey responses. And then we're going to take you through a series of interesting and some might say provocative survey responses that were provided verbatim. Secondly, we're going to take a step back. I'm going to introduce the members of the team and talk only briefly about the process, where we are, and what we're going to do differently. Then third point, and this is something that we haven't discussed yet, we're going to talk about how we provided categorization and prioritization results. And those are big words that may not carry with them as much clarity of meaning. But what that means is we heard back a large number of text responses. What we want to do to help the candidates for bishop is to distill that down to what are the most popular themes that we've heard in those text responses. And this is the way that we decided to do that. Following that, I'll then offer some concluding thoughts, talk about further opportunities, and then we'll conclude with a prayer. All right, 5 takeaways from the survey. The first bullet item here is all about change. So that's one of the key words in this first bullet. And what this says is the next bishop needs to have a vision that fits with what the synod needs. The next bishop would need to clearly articulate that vision, strive to gain alignment, and then most importantly, and this is key, deliver that change. We use the word strive to gain alignment because I think you're going to see that there is diverse feedback here, and it's going to be near impossible for the next bishop to satisfy everyone. So that's where strive to gain alignment comes from. Second bullet, just like the first, I'm going to focus on a key word. The key word here is lean. This takeaway resulted from consideration of some of the decline theme that we heard coming back in the survey responses. What do you mean decline? Well, decline in numbers of members, attendance at our weekly worship, decline in finances, maybe decline in the number of congregations throughout the synod. And so what this says is the synod, and by extension the bishop, will need to take brave and bold steps to run lean, still focusing on our mission to serve others, but to do so perhaps more efficiently. This should include the assessment of the Synod's model for serving member congregations, thinking about both buildings and staffing. Okay, third takeaway. One of the things we wanted to do with this survey is to focus not only on areas where there needed to be improvement, but maybe to encourage feedback about what we're doing well. And one of the areas that we were doing well is service. And so the third takeaway is the Synod needs to continue and enhance its Christian service to communities, congregations, and the service at large. And the bishop needs to empower church leaders to do so. Fourth takeaway, the bishop needs to have the confidence and faith to help the Synod become more accepting and welcoming for all people. And finally, the fifth takeaway, the next bishop must be a leader who has the confidence to make change, recognizing that you can facilitate a good portion of that, but in some situations, it may be necessary for the bishop to make some tough decisions, while empowering, guiding, and lifting up other pastors in that change making, and while being empathetic to and pastoral in the face of a variety of diverse and challenging situations. In short, the next bishop's job will be a difficult one. And so let's move on to learn more from the survey. Okay. What you will have in the next 6 slides is kind of a common format. What we have at the top section of each of these slides is an area of priority for the bishop, a category or whatever. This first one is decline. What you will have at the bottom of each of the screens or slides here is skills that relate to that particular priority area. And in this situation, vision and innovation was paired with decline. What you'll see is we have many verbatim text responses included, and they're color-coded. And the reason for that is we're not going to focus on all of them. We're only going to talk about some, in particular, the purple. So the format for this and the next 5 slides, total of 6, is the same. And I'm going to take you through the purple on each slide. First of all, with regard to decline, a potentially provocative statement here. Strategically rethinking how we will move from 260 congregations to maybe half that. And how do we do that? And how do we ensure that they're in the right location? More positively, in the area of decline, realize that getting and keeping children and youth active in congregations is key, and that begins with educating their parents to the importance of church involvement for their children. Vision and innovation as skills that might relate to that. While the next bishop should have gifts for administration and management, we need a good old-fashioned missionary bishop who can provide or facilitate a vision and, again, importantly, champion reform. Finally, the second purple bullet, creative visioning and the ability to make the vision come to fruition with the participation of staff, mission district, and congregations. A couple of things jump out of that statement for me. Make the vision come to fruition with the participation of staff, mission districts, and congregations. Okay, second of the 6 slides. The priority area, leadership, the skills and gifts that relate, leadership and visibility. First, purple comment about leadership. The next bishop needs to be identifying and being open to change in order to maintain an active presence in the Christian community. The next bishop should articulate a vision and commit to a process of reform that prepares the synod and congregations for this new season of mission. Skills that might be helpful in this area: leadership and visibility, resoluteness after making a decision. Recognition, I think, that there will be debate and discussion. We will then make a decision. And once it's made, the time has come to execute that decision, as opposed to second guessing it. Okay, second and final quote here. The next bishop should be visible within the many congregations throughout the synod, not be someone who is absorbed by the inner workings of the synod, recognizing that's not an easy thing. Third area, priority area for the next bishop, connecting. And skills that we think might be helpful: being personable and being a connector. So connecting, first purple comment. Congregational priorities and congregational decisions are wildly diverse. Keeping us connected to one another and to our neighbors is key and is also going to be difficult. But a strength that emerged from the survey in this area of connecting: continuing outreach to local communities and those further away in other countries as well was deemed to be a priority for the next bishop. And skills in this area: being personable and a connector, being willing to confront and address congregations that are no longer self-sustaining, but doing so in a personable and connecting kind of a way. The ability to handle conflict and lead others to do so using mediation. Third area, third slide of the 6, I think. Priorities for the next bishop: stewardship, and skills that might relate to that: compassion and communication. First one, again, maybe provocative: developing healthy consolidation plans as congregations decline, getting small congregations to merge. The number of small congregations is large that should close, merge, or form other relationships. Develop a plan for congregations who need to die. Second quote in purple here: helping small rural churches continue, helping urban churches maintain enough size to reasonably pay a full-time pastor. Again, you take those two together, they may be mutually in conflict. Maybe there are some ways to bridge them and make them come together in a mutually acceptable way, but there is going to be some of that divergent feedback that the next bishop is going to need to deal with. The third purple here, I think, is very, very important. We have to remember that we are here for ministries, not for buildings. Without the mandate of spreading the gospel, there is no reason for us to exist. Skills in this area: compassion and communication, and empathy for people's and congregations' difficulty and suffering, grace and love, important to be thinking about within that context. The next two relate to embracing newer methods of communication. First, more synod activities need to be in the form of video webinars, photo galleries, etc. People are so busy they can't always get to activities that will help them be a witness. So this would be another way of achieving that goal. Expertise in the use of social media would be helpful for the next bishop. Podcasts, YouTube, and whatever future the technology will provide to share messages and connect with our members. Fifth text response slide. Serving people. All 5 of the bullets in the mission statement as a preface to the survey are crucial and need to be addressed. Now, I neglected to deal with the blue text that appeared on one of the slides earlier, and I'm going to tackle it here. Each one of those are indeed links to resources that you can leverage. So when you have this presentation, you'll be able to use it as a way to navigate to certain other resources. What this person was saying in their feedback is on the original survey, which is coming up here from the web, and this was that 6-question survey. This is the paper-based version. The online version asked the same question, but in a different format. But in both cases, we shared these 5 mission statements that were developed upwards of maybe a decade ago for the Northeastern Pennsylvania Synod. And these 5 items, starting with "we will deepen our relationship with God," was what the first text response in this survey was all about. So again, I wanted to show you what the links were that I was remiss in earlier, and also show you how it related to this comment. Second purple comment: to find ways to voice the words that God gives us so that we can counteract the hateful voices and welcome those who are seeking God but feel rejected. Skills in this area: being pastoral and having a strong faith. The ability to teach and apply the truth of the gospel to contemporary times, I think, is a key suffix or a phrase at the tail end of this comment. And then, the next bishop needs to be pastoral and supportive, but at the same time needs to provide direction for the future, at times which necessitates telling a dying congregation it is time to go. And this may involve also withdrawing life support for such programs such as the lay ministry program as well. Food for thought. And then the 6th and the final text response. Again, I'm trying to gather your interest so we can go through the remainder of the presentation together without my losing you. So, the priority area for the next bishop: welcoming. First comment: resolve same-sex marriages being performed in the church. Secondly, address our whiteness. Anti-racism workshops are needed. And this also makes me think of a comment I remember from the survey about the fact making our congregations look like the communities in which they serve. So openness and listening as skills that maybe will support that priority area of welcoming. Being more open to new ideas, being adaptable. And then finally, try to unite us all in love, hearing all the voices while doing more holy listening. So again, those were quotes, and we tried to select some of the more interesting, maybe provocative, for your consideration as we go through the remainder of our survey results presentation. I'm going to now transition to the second area, take a brief step back. Our info gathering core team are those 5 names at the very beginning: Jamie, Nelson, Todd, Janet, and myself. And you can see there each of our affiliations following our name. We were also very fortunate and blessed to get great advice from some synod leadership. Not only advice, but active support and active participation. They helped us with the work of our team. Kristen Weiner, Vice President of Synod Council, very helpful. Ed Cool, co-chairs of Synod elections. Again, both were very helpful. Now, one of the areas that I wouldn't have predicted that we would have been involved with at the start of this effort is the Home Office ELCA. We had two individuals who were very helpful there, a Mr. John Hessian and a Ms. Deborah Coe. What did they help us with? Well, when we realized the opportunity for an online survey, the ELCA was extremely helpful. They actually put it together and offered it for us and collated the results. So that was area 1 of 2. Area 2 of 2 was they helped us with the analysis framework and also the part of doing the analysis too. Okay, so here we are, a picture of the core team from the left. That's me, George. Then Jamie, Todd, Janet, and Nelson. Here we are, I think in December, at the Synod Center, just opposite the Lehigh Airport. Okay, this slide I know has a lot of fine print, and we're not going to go through much of what's on here, but we put this together to describe what it is that we're going to do. And at the very top, I want to call your attention to some key text. It says, ELCA NEPA Synod, prioritize mission and ministries and attributes for next bishop. That basically, in a few words, encapsulates what it is that we said we were going to do. We're going to produce a list of what are the most important themes for mission and ministry that the next bishop should think about, and what are the most important skills or gifts, we use the term attributes here, only because of space, but attributes for the next bishop to have. So that's one of maybe 3 or 4 things that I want to point out on this slide. Secondly, what I want to point out is in the center left middle of this screen. We had 3 meetings, very successful, large meetings at different congregations throughout the Synod. We started out at Bern Lutheran Church in Leesport. We also then had one up north at Christ Lutheran Church in Conyngham. And we wrapped it up with one in the center at Union Lutheran Church in Snexville. And if you go over just a little bit to the right, we had planned in the May-ish timeframe to have 3 more meetings where we discussed, among other things, the survey response, like what we're doing here in this recording, but with some increased opportunity for interaction. We may still be able to do that down the road, but because we are taking seriously our need to communicate the results of the survey, we wanted to at least start it off with this recording. And the final thing I'll say here is in this pink rectangle at the right where we're having to make some adjustments because of coronavirus. One thing that will not change is we will publish all of these results and make them available to you online so you can get to them all. And I'm going to be taking you through much of that in this presentation. All right, now we're into the third area, starting to talk about the categorization and prioritization, but it all starts with the survey responses. We had 3 very successful meetings, and I listed them here. These 3 blue links that I'm not going to take you to right now are picture albums from what I took, photographs while we were at those 3 different meetings. And you see one from each of the 3 meetings down below. The first meeting is the one that we had at Bern. And here you can see, very tiny up at the center, is Janet leading us in worship, and Nelson handing out some paperwork here at the same time. And I think that's Todd probably doing the same thing over there. Then second in the sequence of things. We met up north at Coningham, Christ Lutheran Church there. And this is Ed Kuhl discussing the elections process there. And then finally, we had a wonderful turnout at Union in Schnecksville, where at this point, folks were sitting in the pews and actually filling out the surveys during that 3-hour meeting. So we had three-hour meetings, and that yielded 151 survey responses. We consider ourselves very fortunate. But as we were talking about these 3 meetings, we said, you know, one thing that we think is true is there is a high fraction of clergy at these 3 sessions. Another is, if you take a look at the average age of the attendee, we don't have a tremendous number of younger people there. So in talking about that, we said, what can we do with that? And we spoke with the bishop and we said, look, given that we've already done what was originally planned, how about we also do an online survey, thinking that might help us with the diversity of responses. And this is where the ELCA was particularly helpful. They put together the survey. We made it available for 2 to 3 weeks. That yielded another 122 survey responses. And so all told, we got 273 back. And one of the keys is we closed the online survey on the 28th of February of 2020. We published all 273 responses 2 days later on the 2nd of March. Pretty impressive. But why did we do that so quickly? Well, we did that because we wanted to let the survey respondents know how important we thought the work was and the seriousness we took of the needed and intended follow-up to the survey results. Okay, so what did we publish? We published a spreadsheet of those survey responses, and this indeed will take us there. So there are about 273 rows because one row is one survey response. And we have some limited demographic data over on the left. We start off with the name if the person supplied a name. That was only possible for meetings as all of the online were anonymous. So we don't have any names for the online. Then this indicates if the survey came back either from a meeting or from an online response. So that's where you will see that distinction. And in the event it was a meeting that supplied the survey, we told you which meeting, and these are in order, so all the burn items are at the very top. Then I'm going to just talk briefly about the orientation of this spreadsheet. For each question, we asked for 3 to 5 responses. So in question 1, this is point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4, point 5. So in that case, that first respondent, which happens to be me, supplied 3 items. Then next, we move into question 2 and the 5 points, and then you can figure out the rest. We go through questions 3, 4, 5, and 6 the same way. So I've already talked about the content of this slide. I've talked about the fact that each row is a survey. I've talked about what the columns are, and I've talked about the demographic data that we had off to the left. All right. Now, we said we were going to do some categorization and prioritization. You think back to that process flowchart. We said we were going to do basically 3 things: host meetings, solicit feedback, publish and talk about responses. Secondly, we said we were going to produce a prioritized list of missions and ministries for the next bishop. And third, we were going to produce a prioritized list of skills and gifts that would be most helpful from or for the next bishop. And do that all from the survey responses that we heard. Now think about it. We got 273 surveys with text responses to multiple points about 6 questions. But what we need to do is produce this most popular list of themes. How are we going to do that? So the methodology here talks a little bit about what we agreed to do. And this was put together in joint discussion with our friends from the ELCA. So first, we developed a common list of categories, and I'll talk more about those category lists later on. Then, for each text response, so for example, in this little rectangular block here, for question 5, the second point, for each text response, and in this case, the text response was team building within our faith and ecumenically, assign one or more of those standard categories to each text response. And here what we did is we assigned the category of connector. Okay? Now the point that I want to make is because some of the text responses were lengthy or covered many different areas, we allowed the assignment of more than one category to a particular text response. And the bottom item in the little rectangle on this screen says willingness to have difficult conversations in regard to struggling churches. In this case, we assigned 2 categories, and you can see the semicolon there separating them. First, conflict management, and secondly, grit. Okay, so we would apply one or more categories to each text response. And then how are we going to get to the priority or the most popular? Well, we simply tallied up the number of times each of those categories appeared within a question. And then we ranked them based upon largest number first. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So I hope that description is clear as we proceed, because the next 4 slides are all similar in format. And I'm first going to talk about the format, and then I will talk about the content for each of the questions. In the title, you'll see in orange the question that's being addressed. And we're not dealing with them in numerical order here. We're dealing with them in terms of order as it relates to the information gathering team's commitment to you to produce results. The first thing we said we would do is to produce a prioritized list of skills or gifts. Okay, so the orange here indicates the question. Then we have 2 main areas of the screen. We have these 2 rectangles here as well. Up at the top, we have the top priority skills or gifts. Those are the most popular ones. Then at the bottom, we have the least popular or the lowest priority skills or gifts. And we included both only so you could see some of what was thought to be most important for that question, and then somewhat lesser important for that question as well. The last thing I want to talk about in terms of organization of these slides is you can see here pastoral is a category that was tallied up, and there were 107 or so total responses in the survey responses for question 5 for that category. But who knows what pastoral means? So that's where this final blue link comes into play. If you go to that link, you will find the definitions that evolved by the team of the ELCA and the info gathering team doing the categorization work. And they're alphabetically arranged, so it could easily be resorted if you wish. But what pastoral means is right here. means providing spiritual guidance or help with theology, and frequently is pastor to pastor support. So in each of these 4 slides, you're going to see that definition of categories there to help you along. Okay. So now I want to start talking about the content of this, and I'll talk about the content of this and the next 3 slides, as I've already given you a roadmap to what each of the slides looks like. Each of these rectangles has a similar format as well. For the question in mind, it includes first the listing of the categories that are appropriate. And since this is at the top of the screen, these are the most popular skills or gifts. And then, because we thought it might be of interest to take a look at the responses by where the survey was collected, the responses were collected. First in blue, you'll see the meetings results. And then in purple, you'll see the online. And again, our thinking is the best way to rank these is in terms of the total number of responses, reflecting both the meetings feedback and the online feedback. But I think one of the things that you'll find a little interesting here is look at the frequency, high frequency of pastoral ranking by those at the meeting. I guess our thought was that might have been owing to the high fraction of clergy represented. Okay, but again, the takeaway about this is when you're ranking these things, at least our thought, the team's thought is use the total number of responses as your primary guide there. And the green is nothing more than like the top 10 or so of the different categories reflected. So what are some of the top skills or gifts that were ranked here? Being pastoral, showing compassion, being a leader, being visionary, being personable. Those were the top 5. And then some that maybe were viewed as a little bit less important, being calm, being a worship lead, being a developer, being young. So those were some that were deemed to be less important for skills or gifts. But this is the way that we thought we'd honor our commitment to give a prioritized list of skills or gifts that would be helpful for the next bishop. Next, same organization to the slide. And what's different here is a couple of things, but one primary thing is the question. So the question here is dealing with priorities for the next bishop's term, as opposed to skills or gifts. And the reason this is second is that is the second thing that we thought was most important in delivering on our commitment to you. Another thing that's different with this slide is the categories. We had one list of categories for the skills or gifts. We had a second list of categories for questions 2, 3, and 4 that were shared across those 3 questions. And it was 2 levels of category. So for example, you can see here leadership, change agent, versus leadership, evangelism. So 2 levels. There's a main category and a subcategory that were put together for consideration. And just like the last slide, you can get to that list of definitions here. And the definition that was used for change agent, encouraging and embracing change. Use change to resolve conflict. So anyway, that's what's different here. Now, what is this telling us about priorities for the next bishop's term? Well, when the team looked at this, if there's one thing that comes out of taking a look at the text responses or this prioritization and categorization work, it's the fact that we need to make change. There's a rather significant amount of votes or responses for those categories here, more than twice the second most ranked category here. So that's why you saw some of the takeaways reflecting change. Top 5, be a change agent, show pastoral leadership, continue serving people, demonstrate social justice with charity, and one of the declines begins to creep in here. This is dealing with aging membership, congregations, and the like. You can see membership and finances begin to crop up a little bit later on here in the list. What's less important? Disciplining pastors for misbehavior, planting new starts, new congregations, for example, less important. Again, offered just to kind of counterbalance the most popular items for the bishop's next term. What delights God? Well, we thought it was important that at least one of the questions be positively focused in terms of trying to draw out of the respondents those things that we are doing well. And that was this question. So what were the top responses here in terms of the overall ranking? Serving people, seen as a strength and something we should enhance and do more of. Providing social justice through charity. Developing pastoral leaders, connecting through the community and the richness of our worship and music programs. Again, down at the bottom, some of the items that are a little bit less important in terms of what's delighting God. Okay. What saddens God? Well, again, up at the top of the list in terms of the most popular, it's not quite the 2-for-1, but it's pretty close. Again, making change, serving people. His focus on ministry for stewardship really gets at stewardship not for the sake of preserving our buildings, but more so for the sake of conducting good ministry. And interestingly, leadership throughout the Northeast Pennsylvania Synod was seen as something that saddens God. So some interesting feedback here in the top 4 or 5 items that were listed here. So again, to summarize these 4 slides, these are the ways we tried to meet our commitment to you to produce that list of prioritized missions and ministries for the next bishop to consider, or the candidates for the next bishop to consider. And also producing a prioritized list of the skills or gifts that would be most helpful. And finally, I'll reiterate one last time the fact that we wanted to focus on what's not only an area for improvement, but also let's focus on what we're doing well and maybe what we can replicate as a best practice. All right, so I want to summarize here the deliverables that are available. I've already shown you the survey. I've already shown you the raw survey responses. We have a separate Excel spreadsheet that I'm going to open up here with Google Sheets, I think. Yeah. And what I want to show you just is for question 2, for example, third point, here's where you can see the categories. And what we did to make it easy for you is we highlighted the categories that were assigned in yellow for each of the different columns that are appropriate here. So you can see what was done, or if need be, if you want to change things, you can certainly do that. But we have two lists of survey responses. One, just the verbatim responses we got, and then secondly, with the categories applied. Okay, I want to wrap up this section by then talking about what categorization and prioritization summaries are available. We gave you a subset of those in the last 4 slides. And what we have here are 2 different views on those results for each of these 4 questions. And we put the guide for those questions at the bottom as well. First, if you just want to look at the results as performed by the information gathering team and the ELCA, I would urge you to go here for presentation with helpful notes. So I'm going to pull up the skills or gifts item, which is question 5. And here you can see a spreadsheet, but it's really in a document form, so you really can't sort this if you want. And I'll call your attention to the fact that the upper portion right over here is what we saw on the slide. The lower portion here is what we also saw on the slide, okay? Those were the least popular responses as well. I promised that there would be notes at the bottom, and indeed you can see them at the bottom of the spreadsheet here. But then we have 3 columns to the right of the blue line that I haven't talked about yet. And I'm only going to talk about them briefly here. I'm not going to go into detail. But our colleagues at the ELCA urged us to consider an alternate way to rank things. A way that would rank the meetings feedback just as important as the online feedback. And why is that offered here? Well, because our ELCA friends suggested that, and we wanted to be respectful. But secondly, doing so is not radically different, does not produce a radically different ranking than what was offered for the, what we recommend to the left of the blue line, which is simply to count up the number of responses, the larger number of responses being the sum of the meetings and the online feedback is the most popular. So you can understand that since we had 150 and some change meetings responses, 122 or so of the online, that the meetings might have a slight advantage there just because they had more surveys. And that's what the ELCA was trying to get at. It's offered here. It's not something that you need to focus on. It's described in the notes, okay? So the first that I took you to is the presentation with helpful notes. The second, and I'm not going to take you here again because of time, but in case you wanted to resort, for example, if you wanted to go to the summary document that I just showed you, which is the presentation here. And if you wanted to sort not on the total, but just on the meetings feedback, you can't do that here. But you could do that in the Excel, and that's what I was bumbling around with here and trying to show you by going to that, or at least referring to that other link. So the whole reason the Excel versions of those 4 sheets are provided is so you can resort them to your heart's desire. Okay. Concluding thoughts, the home stretch. We got diverse feedback from the meetings and from the online surveys. We talked about the mix of clergy and laity. We talked about age distribution, gender distribution. We think we got diverse feedback. I'm sure the candidates for bishop will feel that we also got content, which is diverse feedback as well. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the third bullet here. Many of the responses were passionate. You could see that in some of the text responses that we got. The divergent responses that were offered will make it impossible for the next bishop to satisfy everybody. It's just going to be impossible. So that candidate is going to, or that bishop is going to need to try and sort through this and discern a way forward. Categorization is an art. It was jointly done by the ELCA and our information gathering team. But I guarantee you, if somebody else were to do the categorization, it would be at least slightly different. Hopefully it would be about the same, but it's an art, not a science. Finally, fifth bullet, the categorization and prioritization hints at dominant issues or skills. Not only is that what we said we were going to do, but it begins to give insight as to what are some of the most important skills or gifts for the next bishop, and what are the most important issues to be focusing on, either in terms of areas for improvement or instead in terms of replication of best practices. And lastly, we've given you all of the raw responses to allow you to do further analysis on your own as well. Okay, so what are some of the opportunities for this? First, to use this plan to support the election of the next bishop. Specifically, you can just take the information that the information gathering team has provided, use it, and go forward. And they can be used to, second bullet point, to support question development to be placed in front of candidates at Synod Assembly. That is part of what was planned for these 3-hour survey results and preliminary question development meetings. But instead, we're giving you an abbreviated discussion just of the survey results, and we'll see about an interactive session of larger scope later. Or, you can take some of the Excel spreadsheets, or you can take some of the raw spreadsheets of survey results or categorization, and you can do some additional analysis on your own. The second major area is one that I've heard the Vice President of Council, Kristen Wiener, talk a little bit about as well. Not only as we think about the election of the next bishop, but also for possible improvements over the next 5 to 10 years in our synod. This survey response is a resource that is valuable. And it's valuable from the perspective of both replicating things that we're doing well and improving those areas where we can do better. Okay, I do want to thank you all for your attention through what is probably a 45 or so minute presentation. And because we are a religious organization, and because of our Lutheran common faith, I want to offer this prayer for your consideration. Almighty God and Father, without whose help and blessing all labor is in vain, remember us in our work this day. If it be your will, give us prosperous outcomes from this work and lead us to find satisfaction and contentment in the follow-up tasks at hand. May all our work be done well, that we may glorify you for the sake of him who completed his work for us, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. And with that, I will stop sharing. I will tell you it has been a pleasure